I've completed a lot of story-driven games over the last few years, and honestly, choosing just 10 wasn't easy. Some games impressed me with their graphics, some had amazing gameplay, but for me, the most important thing has always been the story. If a game has a great story, memorable characters, beautiful graphics, and enjoyable gameplay, it automatically becomes special for me. So this ranking isn't based on Metacritic scores or what everyone else thinks. It's simply based on my own experience after completing these games. Before we begin, one thing. I know some of you will have a completely different top 10 list, and that's totally fine. Gaming is subjective. These are simply the games that gave me the best overall experience. So, let's get started. Number 10, Assassin's Creed Mirage. After playing Assassin's Creed Origins, I was actually expecting another huge open-world RPG. Instead, Mirage went back to the classic Assassin's Creed formula. The first thing I liked was Baghdad itself. The city looked beautiful, especially during sunrise and at night. Walking through the crowded streets really gave me that classic Assassin's Creed feeling again. Stealth also became much more important. Instead of fighting dozens of enemies, I actually enjoyed planning assassinations and using the environment to stay hidden. Basim was also an interesting protagonist because his story felt more personal compared to some recent Assassin's Creed games. But honestly, this game could have ranked much higher. The biggest reason it didn't was the pacing. Sometimes the investigations slowed everything down, and personally, I'm not a huge fan of puzzles in games. There were moments where I just wanted the story to continue, but instead I had to spend time solving objectives before moving forward. Even with that, Mirage was still a really enjoyable experience and a good return to the series' roots. That's why it takes my number 10 spot. Number 9, Marvel's Spider-Man 2. I've always enjoyed superhero games, but Spider-Man 2 made simply moving around the city fun. Swinging through New York with the improved web mechanics felt incredibly smooth, and once you unlocked the web wings, traveling became even more exciting. The biggest improvement for me was being able to switch between Peter Parker and Miles Morales. Both characters had different personalities, different abilities, and different fighting styles, which kept the gameplay feeling fresh throughout the game. The graphics were beautiful, the city looked more alive than ever, and the combat became even more satisfying with all the new abilities. Story-wise, I really enjoyed it, although I personally felt the emotional impact wasn't quite as strong as some of the games higher on this list. Still, if you're looking for a fun, cinematic superhero game with amazing traversal and great combat, Spider-Man 2 is an easy recommendation. At number 8, I have God of War Ragnarok. This game improved almost everything from the previous God of War. The world became larger, the combat became more satisfying, the boss fights became even more spectacular, and visually, this game is absolutely stunning. Every realm has its own unique atmosphere, and almost every major character feels important to the overall story. Kratos' journey continues beautifully, and I really enjoyed seeing how the relationship between Kratos and Atreus evolved. However, just like Assassin's Creed Mirage, I did have one small issue: the puzzles. Some of them were enjoyable, but there were quite a few moments where I just wanted to continue the story, and instead, I had to stop and solve another environmental puzzle. That's simply my personal preference. I usually prefer games that keep the story moving instead of interrupting the pacing. Even with that small complaint, Ragnarok delivers incredible combat, amazing graphics, fantastic characters, and one of the best endings I've experienced in an action-adventure game. That's why it comfortably earns the number 8 position. So that's numbers 10 to 8. From this point onward, the games become much more personal to me. These are the games that genuinely stayed in my mind long after the credits rolled. And trust me, the top 5 gets even better. Number 7, Uncharted 4, A Thief's End. Before playing this game, I'd heard so many people call it one of the greatest adventure games ever made. After finishing it, I completely understood why. The first thing that impressed me was how cinematic everything felt. It honestly felt less like I was playing a game and more like I was playing through a Hollywood action movie. From climbing mountains to escaping collapsing buildings and exploring ancient ruins, almost every chapter had at least one unforgettable moment. Nathan Drake is also one of the most likable protagonists I've played. He's funny, smart, and feels like a real person instead of a typical action hero. The chemistry between Nathan, Elena, Sully, and Sam made every conversation enjoyable. The graphics still hold up incredibly well today. Some environments genuinely made me stop for a few seconds just to appreciate how beautiful they looked. The gameplay wasn't complicated, but it didn't need to be. It perfectly balanced climbing, exploration, puzzles, stealth, and action. Now yes, there were a few puzzles throughout the game. As I've mentioned before, puzzles usually aren't my favorite part of any game. But unlike some other games, these puzzles were short enough that they never really interrupted the overall experience. The story kept moving, and that's what mattered to me. Overall, Uncharted 4 delivered one of the most satisfying adventure experiences I've ever had. Coming in at number 6, Beyond Two Souls. This game was actually a surprise for me, and to be honest, when I first started playing it, I was confused. The game constantly jumps between different periods of Jodie's life. One moment she's a child, the next moment she's an adult. Then suddenly you're back in her teenage years. For the first few hours, I honestly couldn't understand how everything connected. I even remember thinking, am I missing something here? But after finishing the game and understanding the complete timeline, everything finally clicked. And once it clicked, I appreciated the story so much more. Jodie's journey is unlike anything I've experienced in another game. Her connection with Aiden creates so many emotional moments, and the choices throughout the game made me genuinely think before making decisions. This isn't a game that relies on massive action sequences. Instead, it focuses on emotions, relationships, and the consequences of the choices you make. The graphics were also impressive, especially considering when the game originally released. The facial expressions and performances helped make every emotional scene feel believable. If I had one complaint, it's definitely the non-linear storytelling. Personally, I think I would have connected with the story even faster if everything had been told in chronological order. But after understanding the full story, that complaint became much smaller. Beyond Two Souls is one of those rare games that actually becomes better after you finish it. Because once you know the full story, you start appreciating all the small details that didn't make sense the first time. That's why it earns my number 6 spot. Before watching Top 5, make sure you subscribe to my channel. That really helps me. Number 5. Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered. Even after playing Spider-Man 2, this is still my favorite Spider-Man game. Why? Because for me, Peter Parker's story felt more emotional. This game perfectly balanced superhero action with Peter's personal life. You weren't just saving the city, you were watching Peter struggle with responsibility, friendships, sacrifices, and protecting the people he cared about. That's what made the story so engaging. Gameplay-wise, this is probably one of the smoothest games I've ever played. The combat feels incredibly satisfying. Every gadget has a purpose. The finishers look amazing. And swinging through New York? Honestly, I never got tired of it. Sometimes I'd ignore the main missions completely and just swing around the city because it felt that enjoyable. Graphically, it still looks fantastic. The lighting, weather effects, reflections, and animations all make New York feel alive. Unlike many open-world games, I never felt like traveling from one mission to another was boring. It was actually part of the fun. If I had to mention one small negative, it would probably be that some side activities became repetitive after a while. But that's such a minor issue compared to everything else the game does so well. For me, Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered is still the complete Spider-Man experience. Fantastic story, fantastic gameplay, fantastic graphics, and one of the most enjoyable open-world games I've ever played. That's exactly why it sits comfortably inside my top 5. Now we've officially reached the top 4. These next 4 games didn't just entertain me, they stayed with me emotionally. These are the games I still think about even after completing them. And choosing the order between them was honestly the hardest part of this entire ranking. Number 4. Detroit Become Human. At number 4, I have Detroit Become Human. This game completely surprised me. When I first started playing, I expected a simple futuristic story about robots. Instead, I got one of the most interactive and emotional stories I've ever experienced. The biggest reason I love this game is because every decision feels important. You're not simply watching the story unfold, you're creating it. Sometimes a small choice changes an entire chapter later in the game. That made every decision feel meaningful because I never knew what the consequences would be. Then there are the 3 main characters, Connor, Marcus, and Kara. Each one has a completely different journey, and somehow the game makes you care about all of them. Connor quickly became one of my favorite characters. Watching his story develop depending on the choices I made was something I had never experienced before. The graphics are still incredible. The facial animations, the voice acting, the music, everything comes together perfectly. The game constantly makes you ask yourself difficult questions. What really makes someone human? Can emotions be programmed? Can machines have free will? Very few games make me think after I finish them. Detroit Become Human definitely did. The only reason it isn't higher is because I personally connected even more with the stories in my top 3. But if someone asked me for a story-driven game where choices truly matter, this would be one of my first recommendations. Number 3. God of War, 2018. Before playing this game, I knew Kratos as the angry warrior from the older games. But this game completely changed how I looked at him. Instead of focusing only on action, it focused on fatherhood. Watching Kratos slowly become a better father to Atreus was one of the best character developments I've ever seen in a game. Their relationship is the heart of the entire story. At the beginning, they barely understand each other, but as the journey continues, you slowly see trust, respect, and love grow between them. That's what made this game special for me. The gameplay is another reason it's this high. The Leviathan axe is probably one of my favorite weapons in gaming. Throwing it, calling it back, the impact of every hit, everything feels satisfying. The one-shot camera throughout the entire game also deserves a lot of credit. There are no obvious cuts. Everything feels like one continuous adventure, and that makes the immersion even stronger. The world is beautiful. The Norse mythology is fascinating. The boss fights are unforgettable. If I had one complaint, just like Ragnarok, it would be some of the environmental puzzles. Personally, I always wanted to keep moving with the story, so whenever I had to stop for another puzzle, it slowed the pacing for me. But honestly, that small complaint doesn't come close to outweighing everything this game does so well. God of War completely reinvented an already legendary franchise, and it became one of my favorite games ever. At number 2, The Last of Us Part 1. This game isn't just about surviving infected. It's about people. It's about loss, hope, trust, and finding family in the most unexpected place. Joel and Ellie's journey is one of the most emotional stories I've ever experienced. At first, they're simply trying to survive, but slowly, without even realizing it, they become family. What impressed me the most wasn't the action. It was the conversations, the quiet moments, the jokes, the little interactions while exploring. Those moments made both characters feel real. By the end of the game, I wasn't just playing as Joel. I cared about Joel. I cared about Ellie. That's something only a few games have managed to make me feel. The gameplay is simple but extremely satisfying. Every encounter feels dangerous, resources are limited, and every bullet matters. The graphics in the remake are simply incredible. The facial expressions alone add so much emotion to every scene. Now, I also completed The Last of Us Part 2. While I still enjoyed Part 2, I personally felt disappointed that the story moved away from the possibility of finding a cure. After finishing Part 1, I genuinely thought the next chapter would build toward humanity finally getting hope again. Instead, Part 2 chose a different direction. That doesn't make it a bad game. It just wasn't the direction I personally wanted. Part 1, however, is almost perfect for me. It's emotional, beautiful, simple, and unforgettable. And finally, my number 1 game of all time, Red Dead Redemption 2. Honestly, I don't even know where to begin. I've played many games. Some had better combat, some had bigger maps, some had incredible graphics. But no game has ever immersed me the way Red Dead Redemption 2 did. The world doesn't just look alive, it feels alive. You can spend hours doing absolutely nothing related to the main story, and somehow still discover something new. A random stranger, a hidden cabin, a unique encounter, a beautiful sunset. Every single part of the map feels handcrafted. Then there's Arthur Morgan. For me, Arthur Morgan is the greatest video game protagonist I've ever experienced. At the beginning, he's simply an outlaw trying to survive. But as the story progresses, you see him change. You see him question his choices. You see him grow. And by the end, he became one of the most unforgettable characters in gaming. The writing is phenomenal. The dialogue feels natural. Every member of the gang has their own personality. Even side characters feel memorable. The graphics still compete with modern games even years after release. The attention to detail is unbelievable. Horse animations, weather, wildlife, NPC behavior. Everything works together to create a world that feels real. The gameplay is slower than many modern action games, but honestly, that's exactly why I love it. It gives you time to appreciate the world instead of rushing from one objective to another. Even after completing the game, I found myself thinking about Arthur, about the gang, about the journey. Very few games stay with me after I finish them. Red Dead Redemption 2 did. For me, it isn't just my favorite game, it's the greatest gaming experience I've ever had. And that's why Red Dead Redemption 2 will always be my number one. So that's my personal top 10 games of all time. This list wasn't based on review scores or popularity. It was based on one simple question. Which games gave me the most memorable experience? Story has always been the biggest factor for me. If a game gives me unforgettable characters, meaningful moments, enjoyable gameplay, and a world I genuinely want to explore, it's going to stay with me forever. I'm sure many of you have a completely different list, and that's the best part about gaming. Every player connects with different stories. So now I want to ask you, if you could choose just one game as the greatest game you've ever played, what would it be? Let me know in the comments. Maybe your number one is on this list, or maybe it's a game I haven't played yet. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more story-focused gaming content. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.